My name is Kim and welcome to the Quarter Acre Homestead. Today is my inaugural video. It's not the first video I recorded, unfortunately. Yesterday I pressure canned for the first time in my entire life. I'm 55 years old, and while I have water bath canned and steam canned, I had never pressure canned because I was very, very terrified of the process and all of the horror stories that I have heard. And yesterday I canned Great Northern beans for the first time, and unfortunately when I finished the process and went to edit my video, I realized that I recorded the video in slow motion and I haven't found a way to turn that into normal speed successfully. So today we're trying another method of pressure canning beans, and we're canning pinto beans. So there are two ways in my book that I have found for Presto. I have the Presto 23 quart pressure canner, and it gives two methods of canning beans. The first is what we did yesterday, what I did yesterday, and that is to soak your beans overnight, then rinse them in the morning, and then do the next step, which is what I'm doing now. Cook them for 30 minutes, and I'm going to set a timer. Cook them for 30 minutes, then rinse them, and then fill your jars. The other method, which is what I did today, is to put your beans in boiling water for 2 minutes and then remove them from the heat and let them sit for an hour. Then you rinse them, and now I'm doing the next step, which is the same thing that we did with the yesterday's method. Cook them for, turn it down just a hair, but cook them for 30 minutes. Then we'll rinse them and then fill our jars. But I thought that I would get on early and just share a little bit about what you can expect from this channel. In 2020, I started watching, as I think a lot of us did, started watching homesteading and prepper channels. I started my own garden for the first time. I had a pretty successful garden the first 2 years. Last year I did not have a successful garden. My volunteer tomato plants were my most successful, but I had so many squash bugs that I didn't get a crop of zucchini at all. I felt like a major failure last year. I've done a lot of research, and I'm going to try a lot of different things this year, including ways to improve my soil. And I thought, why not share all of those things that I'm learning with each of you? I already have a channel where I share diabetic friendly recipes, Healing Place Cottage. You might be coming to me from that channel, and that's a place where I share my journey as a type 2 diabetic. I'm on a weight loss journey. I've lost 55 pounds, and I'm very passionate about making diabetic friendly recipes that are easy and tasty. And I thought, why not share how to get there with food growing and food preservation, but also the other things that I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about thrifting. I have another business where I am set up in an antique mall, and I thrift. I propagate my own plants, house plants, and I sell those in vintage or different types of containers. And I just have a lot of passions around living a simpler life, reusing what we can, and being good stewards of the earth. And so I decided to start my own channel here, the Quarter Acre Cottage Homestead. I live in a cottage on about 3/10 of an acre. All of my all of my garden land is in the front of my house. The back of my house is a big deck, and it sits against my neighbor's property, which is a hill with trees that goes down to a river. And at some point I'll show you that. It's very beautiful, and I'm very lucky to have that as my backdrop of my backyard. But I put in a couple of raised beds in the front of my yard. I put in a couple of raised beds in the front of my yard, and this year I'm going to try and see if I can have drip irrigation put in, and just a lot of different things that I think would be helpful for all of us novice gardeners and novice homesteaders to share together. And so I really look forward to doing that with you. So I'll tell you a little bit more about what I did yesterday and what I'm doing today. So yesterday I canned Great Northern beans, and as I mentioned, I used the process where you soak the beans overnight. I read that 4 pounds of beans should yield 8 pints. That was very, very inaccurate. 4 pounds of beans yielded almost 16 pints. I do pints because I'm not a big family, so I think that I'll typically use pints at a time. I mix my beans a lot, so even if I'm making a chili, I would typically use 3 different types of beans. So I think pints will work out best for me. And I went through the whole process yesterday with no issues. The only thing that I forgot was to add vinegar to my water, so I have a lot of white residue on the tops of my jars. But the only thing that I'm not sure about, and I haven't used the beans yet, obviously, but the only thing I'm not sure about is looks like there's a lot of softness in the beans. And so I thought, well, I'm going to try the next method, which is in my book, which is what we're doing today, where we cooked them for 2 minutes, or we put them in boiling water for 2 minutes, let them sit an hour. Now we're cooking them for 30 minutes. We'll rinse them, and then we'll fill our jars. There is one other method that I see a lot of homesteaders use, but that I have not found in my book, and that is to dry pack your beans. And I do think that I will try that, even though it isn't an official method that's in my book, because I do have a lot of confidence in the people that I follow that use that method. I am not ever going to share anything other than what I'm learning. I am not going to come up with my own process for canning. I don't ever think that I'll be at that level of confidence that I can make decisions about the safety of canning. And I think you have to make decisions about your own canning safety. But I want to be able to share this with you because I know that a lot of people are like me who are intimidated by pressure canning. And I heard a lot. I didn't even use my Instant Pot yet. I've had an Instant Pot, and I haven't even used that yet because of the horror stories I heard about using an Instant Pot. So pressure canning was very daunting to me, and as I shared with some of my friends on social media yesterday, I know that it's been daunting to a lot of you as well. So my goal is to take some of that fear out of pressure canning, and I think it'll open up a variety of ways that I can preserve food that I grow along with doing the beans. Now, I don't think that it's less expensive for me to can beans. I bought the dry beans. They're non-GMO, but they are not organic, but they are non-GMO. And I think that yesterday for the 16 pints that I did, the beans cost $7.44. And then I have had to invest in the jars because I have some jars, but I don't have enough jars, and I didn't have pint jars. I've mostly canned either quarts or half pints. So I see the canner and the jars as an investment that get reused. So those are things that are the cost of business, a cost of doing business. So the thing that I'm trying to calculate into the cost of the canning of beans are the lids and the beans themselves. So for me, the lids, the cheapest I can get lids is about 34 cents each. That's if I use 4 jars. And if you're like me, you've heard a lot of the homesteaders use the term for jars. It's FOR jars, FORJARS. A lot of the homesteaders will have 10% off coupons. You can buy those lids, those seals in bulk. So you can get 100 wide mouth for, I think, $34.95. So 34 cents is about the cheapest that I can get a lid. So with my jars yesterday, we're looking at about 80 cents per jar of what I canned. Now, if you buy generic beans, especially at Aldi or Walmart, they're going to be around 80 cents or less per jar. If you buy a name brand bean such as Bush's beans, I think that they're about $1.30 per jar. So am I saving money? No. I do like the fact that my beans are non-GMO, and I do like the fact that there's no lining in the cans that I'm dealing with that's not BPA free. So those are two things that are important to me, and so that makes it worthwhile to me to can the beans. But you may find that canning beans is not worthwhile to you. You may also find that just using your Instant Pot to pressure cook your beans, not having to think in advance about soaking the beans overnight and those steps, may be an easier route for you. But I wanted to give it a try to just be able to go and take the can off my shelf, because that's what I do for my other videos that I mentioned that are diabetic friendly. I always try to make recipes that take 30 minutes or less. So typically, I'm going to tell you I'm using a can of beans, whether that's a store-bought can of beans or my own canned beans, and you're going to use that same process yourself. Store-bought beans typically, but I don't typically think that I will do a side dish like beans in the Instant Pot unless it's the whole meal, especially for those videos. So we're going to give it just a few more minutes. We've got about 19 minutes to go. Then we'll come back and we will rinse our beans and we will fill our jars. And we'll do our next step. So I just finished cooking these for 30 minutes, drained and rinsed them. And now we're going to prepare our pressure canner. So inside your pressure canner, it comes with a, it's not called a tray, an insert. Has to be in there anytime you're going to can so that your jars don't touch the bottom. And then you want to fill it with about 3 inches worth of water, which my understanding is about 3 quarts. It's actually more like 5.5, 6 quarts. So I've already put a half a teaspoon of salt in each of my jars. That's not required. It is for taste. So if you don't want to use salt, you don't have to. The other thing that I've heard that salt does is prevents the beans from getting even softer. So I definitely want to do that. This is a funnel that I saw one of the homesteaders I watched, Little Mountain Ranch. It goes over your jar. This is especially helpful when you are canning jams. And let me show you. So we're going to put our beans in up to 1 inch head space. So that only made, 2 pounds of beans only made 7 pints. Now I'm going to add hot water up to that 1 inch mark as well. And now we're going to debubble our jars. And if you don't have, you could use a spurtle, or I think there's an official debubbler. I'm using a wooden chopstick. You can use a butter knife, but I have heard that you want to not use metal because it could chip your jars. I do feel like these are gonna overcook even with this method, so I will be anxious to try the method of dry packing the beans. So you just want to top off to where it's appropriate to reach that 1 inch. So now we're going to add our seals. And we'll add our rings. And you just want to do them finger tight. So you don't want to put your hand down and tighten it like that. You just want to tighten it with your fingers. That way it allows the pressure to escape when they're in the canner. The jars are very hot from that hot water. And the reason we're letting our water come up to temperature in the canner is because you want your jars and if you're using hot jars, you want to use hot, beans are hot water. You want hot water in your pressure cooker so that you don't crack your jars by having different temperatures. So now we're going to put on our lid. And the canner has a V here on the top, and there's a V arrow here. You want to line those up. And so what we're going to do is we're going to wait for steam to come out of the vent pipe. And then when steam starts to come out of the vent pipe, we're going to set our timer for 10 minutes. And then we're going to add our weight to the vent pipe, and we will let it come up to pressure at that point. For my canner and my elevation is 797, and it says that for my elevation, I'm going to let it get up to 11 psi. That's different types of canners have different. I know the All-American canner, it is 10 psi, but for the Presto, it says that you want process at 11 pounds of pressure, pints 75 minutes, and quarts 90 minutes. For processing above 2,000 feet altitude, there's another page for recommended pounds of pressure. So definitely check what the pressure is for your altitude. I forgot a step, which I forgot yesterday as well. You're supposed to wet your rag and clean the rim of your jars. And this does two things. One, it makes sure that you don't have any cracks in your jar lids, which mine are new jars, so hopefully I don't have any cracks on my lids yet, or on my rims yet. The other is it removes any residue to make sure that you have a good seal when your lid goes on and it processes in your canner. Another thing I wanted to share is that once you have cooled your jars, you want to remove your rings. The rings can cause a false seal, and you want to make sure that you do that. The other thing that I wanted to share is I saved my boxes that my jars came in because I don't have solid wood shelving or solid shelving. I have wire shelving, and the jars are a little bit rocky on that type of shelving. So I saved my boxes, and I'm going to use them that way. The other good thing about that storing them that way is if you're going to stack, it gives something between the lids of your jars and the bottoms of the other jars. We can see steam coming out now, so we're going to set our timer for 10 minutes. You won't believe this, but I actually was videoing on slow motion again. I've got to figure out how to get that off of there. But so we let this get up to temperature, get up to 10 minutes with steam coming out of the vent pipe, put the weight on, and then we let it get up to 11 pounds of pressure. And then I set the timer for 75 minutes. I'm at 12 pounds of pressure now. I have turned my heat down to medium. That was what works for my stove according to yesterday, but I have to keep an eye on it because what happens is you can't go below your whatever you're supposed to be, your pressure's supposed to be. So for me at 11, I can't go below 11 or I have to restart that 75 minutes all over again to be safe. Now you can go a little over, like I'm at 12, and that's okay. You just can't go below 11. I do have a concern because I only put 7 jars in the canner, and I can hear a little bit of rattling, and I'm concerned that that's going to affect whether or not I get 7 good jars out of the canner. So while this is canning, I'm going to check and see if that's an issue. So I'm going to have to keep checking, keep my eye on this to make sure it doesn't go below 11. And we have about 70 minutes left. Then we'll come back and I'll explain what the next process is once that 75 minutes is over. All right, we have about 1 minute left in our canning process. And I really had to watch the pressure today more so than I did yesterday. I'm not sure if it's because the temperature is cooler today, but medium it felt like it was bringing it down too much. So I'm at 13, but I was at 11, and even though 11's where I was supposed to be, it scared me that it was going to go lower than that. So I turned it back up a little bit, and I'm between 6 and 7 now. I mean 5 and 6. So we will go ahead and turn our timer off. It's just going to getting ready to go off. And we will turn our heat down or off. And we will allow this to zero out. And so yesterday that took a little over an hour. But you don't want to touch anything until your gauge goes down to 0. And so we'll come back when it's at 0 and we'll do our next steps. Okay, our gauge is at 0 and we will do our next step, which is to remove the weight. But remember, that is hot. So I'm going to use a pot holder and remove that. And then we're going to break the seal on the canner by moving the arrow away and lifting off the lid. You want to be very careful about how you store your pressure canner lid. You do not want to lay it down so that the gauge is resting on the table or anything. Always set it up like this so that your gauge is intact. We're going to remove our jars. Okay, all of our jars seem to be in good condition. You can see that they're still boiling. I don't know if you can see that, but they're still bubbling, which is kind of exciting to me. I just like that, how the whole process works. But I hope that you enjoyed our time together today and learning how to pressure can along with me. We will do this again with the dry bean method that I had discussed. Until then, I hope that you will follow me on, become a subscriber on YouTube, like this video if you enjoyed it, and you can follow me on Instagram and on Facebook. I'm still setting those up, but happy to have you join me in this journey as we learn and grow together. Take care, friends.